Clearly, some female fans are completely obsessed with BTS, and Swifties are also similarly obsessed with Taylor Swift. There's nothing initially wrong or right with that, it's just a thing. But no one is claiming to ovulate over Taylor Swift somehow. I promise you will leave this very stupid sounding video title with a lot more information than you initially thought you would get. I think this is the most feminist thing somebody could say over an article that initially started with objectifying men. BTS isn't causing ovulation. ARMY is causing other ARMY to ovulate. Hello and welcome to the Mugcast. I'm Hannah and I aspire to teach you something through music that you've never thought of before. Today's topic is how horny are women at concerts? Though this sounds really strange, trust me, there's a lot to learn in this episode. Generally, I think reproductive health is something we should be talking about more. We should be silencing those thoughts less, and we should all, as women, have our own little 101 of how our bodies function. So here I am trying to give you some extra insights on the intersection between music and biology. A disclaimer at the start, I'm not a doctor, I'm a speech and language therapist, so much of what I've been going to be talking about today was part of my undergrad, and I learned how to do academic research. I'm not a doctor. So anything I say in this episode is purely for informative and entertainment purposes. It's not medical advice. If any questions come up during this video, please go and ask a medical professional or a doctor for help. Let's get started. And before we do that, I always take on my pretentious glasses for every single episode. Ready, steady, go. So I'm going to be answering 3 questions that really tie into each other in the process of this video. The first one is, can a woman's period return in menopause because of a concert? The second question we have to ask is, can a concert by BTS or otherwise cause ovulation? And the third question, which I think is the most important and most interesting one, can you only ovulate over a BTS concert? Or could you also ovulate over seeing Taylor Swift live, for instance, or any other artist? And now we're going to get into the third most interesting question. Why is it that people associate ovulation with BTS and not a Taylor Swift concert or a Saturday night at a bar? Clearly, some female fans are completely obsessed with BTS, and Swifties are also similarly obsessed with Taylor Swift. There's nothing initially wrong or right with that, it's just a thing. But no one is claiming to ovulate over Taylor Swift somehow. The reason lies in the hormonal background of fan-artist relationships, which we also call parasocial relationships. Parasocial relationships are one of my absolute all-time favorite research topics because it's so interesting how this completely previously foreign concept before the 1920s, the image of a star didn't exist in the same shape or form that we have it today. 1920s is the time, 20s and 30s, when Hollywood industry in LA started inventing this image of the female star. This is something I covered in my last video about Ariana Grande over here. Ever since then, parasocial relationships have been a growing part of human lived experience, an important part of our socialization. And that's why I love it so much, because it bridges sociology with psychology and a little bit of biology together. It creates this whole basket of questions, of which what we're answering today is only one. These parasocial relationships, whether with Taylor Swift, BTS, Ariana Grande, I don't know, whoever else, trigger motivation and reward systems in our brain, and they trigger them to release dopamine. Dopamine, which we all know from dopamine detox, which is when you try to get off your screen, something you're not doing right now, is a loop of positive reinforcement that sometimes can have addiction potential. And this positive feeling, like in the case of screen addiction, for instance, can be to our detriment. Idols in the music business are especially adapted to this cycle and reinforcement loop through marketing. Their marketing scheme naturally leverages and triggers dopamine through frequent re-exposure. And this is the first answer to why BTS concerts are so connected to the ovulation myth and why it's not a random Saturday at a bar that people think makes them ovulate. Dopamine needs repeated exposure to keep hitting, and to keep hitting harder every single time. Because every time you will want more. Sure, making out a bar with a stranger at a Saturday night feels good. It also triggers something, but the intense reduplicating dopamine surge that you get from seeing BTS over and over and over again on your phone feels different. This focus on the reinforcement loop by letting fans in on their idol's life much more than maybe a US star would is very purposeful. It is one of the main hinges of discussion and a trigger for success in the K-pop industry and their idol groups, of which BTS is part. But K-pop wasn't the inventor of this system. Again, it has been a long-standing system since the 1920s and 30s in Hollywood when this was first discovered. And I'm sure there's people who have been doing this before. It's just that K-pop got especially efficient around it. There's a very interesting hidden element to this idol culture, which is that lots of fans, including me, have BTS saved me theories and stories. This is when fans of BTS tell a story of their own personal low point and how BTS was the reason or part of the reason that they got out of it. So basically, they're tying their finding of BTS fandom to the improvement of their quality of life. This experience has a biologic baseline because someone who's low in dopamine and might feel really shitty might feel much better suddenly when engaging with BTS. The important part to mind, though, is to not get dependent on that dopamine surge. I was talking about that in my Taylor Swift psychology video before, a long time ago already. BTS delivers your dopamine to get you out of that hole, maybe. But to exit the hole is equally as important. So at the right time, when your dopamine is high again, you need to be able to exit their dopamine serving, and you need to find your own sources of dopamine outside of them, because otherwise you're getting caught in this addiction cycle. This again is an argument for the out of the ditch theory that I already proposed earlier. BTS can't make you happy enough at a concert to ovulate if you're already happy. But the joint experience of ARMY with BTS for somebody who's in a high stress mode or traumatized can help you out of that ditch or potentially even ovulate in the most crazy of scenarios. Similarly, a depressed woman who finds BTS will more likely find refuge in the fandom than somebody who's baseline happy. And all this is a natural result of dopamine-seeking behaviors in humans. But is it really the K-pop idol concept that drives the female frenzy for BTS? Why is it not Blackpink or Taylor Swift? And here's where we finally leave the biological domain and we enter the socialization of humans. And I love this little hinge between biology and socialization because the overlap is where lots of questions lie and lots of intriguing answers. As a matter of fact, dopamine circles also work for female idols and stars just the same, but fandoms seek different sorts of nurturing from their stars. I've already written about how fandoms these days are much like religions. You can check the video out over here because they provide values to humans these days that previously maybe were provided by religions. On a basic level, this means that yes, Taylor also creates surges of dopamine in her fans, but we decide to decode these surges differently. Linguistically, we call them something different. Taylor's fans feel empathy for her and they look up to her and they share her values. And BTS fans also look up to them and share their values, but they might also fall in love with them. Concerts and fandoms are much more a cultural narrative than they are hormonal pathways. Swifties are predominantly women, and in a traditional patriarchal script, women don't lust after other women. Obviously, this is changing, and I'm not in support of this theory. I'm just saying that's the socialization that underlies the system. BTS fandom, ARMY, is also mainly female. Millions of women falling for 7 guys on a stage is definitely acceptable according to the same social script, even if we give those women a side eye. Actually, this female frenzy for male stars is far from a new concept. Female fans were side-eyed for fainting at Beatles concerts already. Back then, in 1963, they actually called this Beatlemania. In a similar vein, in 2017, at a One Direction concert, there was an actual medical emergency that got triggered and then reported in medical research. A 16-year-old fan at this One Direction concert screamed so fiercely that part of her respiratory tract collapsed. Basically, one of her lungs collapsed. Her treating physician noted that this kind of respiratory injury is actually not very typical in these kinds of scenarios. Usually, this only happens for military drill surgeons or scuba divers. Among the hysteria of Beatlemania and the One Direction lung collapse, a mass ovulation for BTS fans seems almost gentle. But the reason we see these cases is not actually a difference between bands or stars, but rather in the case of male stars. Our socialization and our biology overlap a little bit too well. The idea of women screaming for a man serves as a breeding ground for jokes and misogynistic comments like, "Look at those girls, they don't have their shit together." So technically, a long-term stressed Swiftie who has been exposed to Taylor for a very long time and then entered the Eras Tour, for instance, where she sings and dances and syncs up her heartbeats and breathing and brainwaves with fellow fans, fellow Swifties, might also experience ovulation under the same conditions as BTS. But likely she will not go home and call it an ovulation. She will just call it a great night. So, what have we established? First of all, most postmenopausal women probably don't get a period after a concert, BTS or otherwise, and even if they did, 14 days after the concert, which is the only condition under which it is actually caused by the concert, because the concert triggered the ovulation, this ovulation can only be triggered in previously highly stressed or traumatized individuals. For every pre-menopause BTS fan at a concert, this means that if you're not severely traumatized, causing your ovulation to cease beforehand, before you go to the concert, you are likely just coincidentally ovulating at the concert, if you're actually ovulating at all. Because some people just claim it because it's a funny joke, right? But at the same time, know that you're not ovulating over the members of BTS, but because of the fandom surrounding you and singing with you. I think this is the most feminist thing somebody could say over an article that initially started with objectifying men. Additionally, as you purchase your next photo card or vinyl from whatever artist, know that you're financially investing in your own dopamine reward system cycle, and that you had better keep an eye on exiting it at the right time before you get addicted. Parasocial relationships are great drivers, but they can be a little bit tricky, especially when industries leverage it. And again, the K-pop industry is not the only one doing it, they're just the ones who get the most blame for it. K-pop simply improved an already existing system. And finally, I would like you to take a minute to consider whether your comment about Taylor Swift or BTS is a comment on them, on their music, or just about your own social conditioning. Ovulating over BTS is a funny joke, but I think it's worth knowing the background of it, especially if you are a feminist or in general a woman. I'm not holding you from making these jokes. Of course you can, and of course they're also funny. But I would like you to know the body and the difficult landscape behind it that all of us women are sharing. As I keep saying, I think the challenge of the fifth wave of feminism, which is happening right now, is to bring women together through empathy and education. And with this video, I hope I've done a little bit of my own part. And with that, I want to say thank you very much for listening to today's episode. If you ever want to read an article before the video comes out, you can hop over to my Medium and check out the original articles over there. Please hit follow and like this video. Leave me a comment if you have any remarks or you want to recommend any music. I hope you had a nice cappuccino with this episode, and I send a warm hug from my mug to yours. I hope to see you soon somewhere else on Hannah's Café. Bye bye!